I never thought this would happen to me. I mean, I had been careful. Hardworking, polite, always the first to arrive and the last to leave. But there I was, sitting at my desk on a Wednesday morning, when everything I thought I knew about my job, about my life, crumbled in an instant. And it wasn't just any bad day. No. This was the kind of moment that gets seared into your memory forever. The kind that makes your heart hammer and your stomach twist. Have you ever felt that? The absolute sinking feeling that the floor could open up and swallow you whole? That's exactly where I was. But before we continue, please subscribe and turn on the notification bell for updates. The office was buzzing like any normal day. Colleagues laughing, phones ringing, keyboards clacking. But I noticed the way Damien was watching me from across the room. Damien Cole. 45, perfectly tailored suits, a smile that somehow made your skin crawl. The man who had a way of making you feel like a pawn in his own little chess game. He leaned back in his chair and gave me that look, a tiny smirk, like he knew something I didn't. And in that moment, I had a sickening feeling. I didn't know it yet, but that look was the opening move. I could almost feel the tension in the air tighten, thick enough to choke on. I glanced at my calendar, trying to focus. Maybe I was overthinking it. But then, the meeting invite popped up. Quarterly review, conference room B. My stomach dropped. It wasn't just a review. It never is when someone like Damien schedules it without context. And I remembered every tiny incident that had happened over the past few weeks, the emails I didn't get credit for, the subtle digs in meetings, the way he'd undermine me just enough that no one else noticed but me. And then it happened. He called me into the meeting, and I walked in thinking this was routine. My coworkers were already there, some pretending to work, others clearly curious. I didn't yet know that by the end of this half hour, I'd be the center of everyone's attention for all the wrong reasons. And just when I thought the humiliation would hit its peak, HR walked in. But they didn't look at me. They looked at him. And that's when my world shifted entirely. The door closed behind them, and I knew, whatever came next, it wasn't for me. But what came next would change everything. And no one saw it coming. Have you ever felt the walls closing in on you, even when you're standing in the middle of a room full of people? That's exactly how I felt the moment Damien stepped closer, his smirk stretching just enough to make my skin crawl. I had walked into what I thought was a routine meeting, and suddenly, every eye in the room was on me. My heart started racing, and my hands grew clammy. I wanted to turn and run, but I couldn't. I was frozen, caught in the gravity of what was about to unfold. "Alex," he said, his voice smooth, too smooth, the kind of voice that makes your stomach twist. "You're being let go. Effective immediately." The words didn't register at first. My brain stalled, scrambling for comprehension. Did he just fire me? Right here? In front of everyone? I could feel the room tilt, like the air itself had grown heavier, charged with the silent electricity of shocked coworkers. Lisa, sitting 2 seats away, widened her eyes, but didn't say a word. Mark, who always had an opinion, shifted nervously and muttered something under his breath that I couldn't hear. I wanted to speak, to defend myself, to say something, anything, but the words stuck in my throat. It was as if Damien's smile had trapped them there, mocking me in silence. The hum of the air conditioning, the clicking of keyboards, all of it faded. It was just him and me, and the unbearable intensity of humiliation. And yet, in that moment of despair, a strange clarity hit me. How many times had I been overlooked? How many times had my ideas been credited to someone else? How many times had I swallowed the frustration because that's just office politics? And now, suddenly, it all felt like a cruel joke, delivered with a flourish by Damien, as if my life's work were nothing but a performance piece for his amusement. I swallowed hard, trying to steady my shaking hands, when the faintest sound cut through the tension, the crisp, deliberate steps of someone entering the room. HR, Renee Walker. And she didn't look at me. Not once. Her eyes were locked on Damien. My stomach dropped. What could she possibly want with him? And then she said my name. I froze. The room went silent. What happened next would unravel everything I thought I knew about that office, and it wasn't meant for me. Have you ever watched someone who seems untouchable suddenly shift under pressure? That's exactly what happened the moment Renee Walker, HR, stepped into the room. The click of her heels against the tile was louder than anything Damien had ever said, and somehow it carried authority without a single raised voice. I had been expecting HR to look at me, maybe offer comfort or at least a formal explanation. But no, she didn't even glance in my direction. Her eyes were locked on Damien. And in that instant, the air in the room shifted. "Damien," she said, calm but firm, "please step outside with me." The words hit like a thunderclap. Damien's smirk faltered. For the first time, the man who had spent months making subtle digs, undermining me in meetings, and showing off his power felt small. The corners of his mouth twitched, like he was trying to reassert control, but Renee didn't blink. My colleagues leaned in slightly, whispering, trying to guess what could possibly be happening. Mark's eyes widened, and I swear I saw him mutter under his breath, "Is she firing him instead?" Damien hesitated. He looked around, trying to gauge reactions, but Renee's presence was magnetic, calm, composed, and utterly unshakable. I couldn't hear what they were saying as they left the room, but every step they took out the door echoed through my mind. I felt a strange mix of disbelief, relief, and curiosity. What could HR possibly be confronting him about? What hidden truth had been simmering beneath the surface all this time? I glanced around at my coworkers. Some were trying to look nonchalant, pretending they weren't eavesdropping. Lisa was biting her lip, clearly concerned, while Mark looked like he was holding back a laugh or a gasp, I couldn't tell which. The office felt suspended in a bubble, each second stretching out, pregnant with anticipation. And then I realized something even stranger. I wasn't the one in danger anymore. All of Damien's careful planning, his little games, his dominance in the office, none of that mattered. Not here, not now. I sank slightly into my chair, my pulse still racing, my mind spinning with questions. What exactly was Renee telling him behind that closed door? What secret had she uncovered that could turn the tables on someone like Damien? And then the door clicked again. The office was silent in a way that made every breath feel loud. I could hear my own heartbeat thudding in my ears as I stared at the closed door, trying to guess what was happening inside. Damien had always been untouchable, the kind of person who made everyone around him feel small without raising a finger. But now he was behind a door with Renee Walker, and I could sense a shift in the atmosphere, even from where I sat. Something was happening that no one, including me, had seen coming. I could barely contain my curiosity. I leaned slightly forward, straining to catch any hint of what was being said. Just fragments reached me through the barely there cracks of the door. Damien's voice, higher than usual, stammered, I don't see why this is necessary. I handled everything." Renee's calm voice cut through him like ice. "We've been reviewing the misconduct reports, Damien. It's more serious than you think. I need full transparency. Now." A chill ran down my spine. Misconduct? Damien? The man who had spent months undermining me, smirking at every little failure I supposedly had, now confronted with something so serious that HR was demanding his full cooperation. I could hardly believe it. For months, he had made me feel powerless, and now, behind a single door, the power dynamics were flipping in real time. I caught sight of Lisa across the room, her mouth slightly open, as if she, too, realized what might be happening. Even Mark was frozen, trying to suppress a mixture of shock and delight. I couldn't stop my mind from racing. What other secrets had Damien been hiding? How long had Renee been collecting evidence, observing, waiting for the right moment to act? And why had I been fired first? Was it a distraction, a setup, or simply the opening move in a much larger game? Minutes stretched like hours. When the door finally opened, Damien walked back into the room, but he was different. The confident, smug boss everyone feared was gone. His shoulders slumped slightly, his eyes darted around nervously. The room seemed to recognize the change immediately. I felt a strange mixture of relief and disbelief. All the humiliation, all the tension of the morning, it suddenly felt like it had been leading to this. And then I realized I had been watching the true reckoning unfold, and I had survived it. But I also knew one thing. Nothing in that office would ever be the same again. I walked out of that meeting room feeling lighter, confused, exhilarated, and oddly vindicated all at once. It was a strange cocktail of emotions. Humiliation that had been turned into a lesson, fear transformed into clarity, and power that I didn't realize I had witnessed from the sidelines. I couldn't stop replaying it in my mind. Damien, the man who had ruled the office with subtle intimidation, humbled in front of everyone, while I, the one he thought he could break, had watched it all unfold. As I gathered my things, the office buzzed around me, but it felt different. Eyes lingered a little longer. Whispers floated through the air, subtle but unmistakable. Some people were shocked, some amused, and some quietly approving of what had just happened. I caught Lisa giving me a small, knowing smile, and even Mark seemed unsure how to process the turn of events. It was like the scales had shifted in a way no one expected, and I had been given a front-row seat. I reflected on everything. The months of subtle sabotage, the sleepless nights worrying if I was doing enough, the endless attempts to prove myself. And yet, it took someone else noticing, someone powerful enough to act, to expose the cracks in Damien's carefully maintained facade. The irony wasn't lost on me. Sometimes, the person who seems untouchable is the most vulnerable when someone else finally decides to hold them accountable. And then it hit me. This wasn't just about a single firing or a single confrontation. It was a reminder that power is fleeting and perception can be manipulated, but truth has a way of rising to the surface. I had lost my job, yes, but in a way I had gained perspective. And sometimes, perspective is far more valuable than a paycheck. So I left the office that day, carrying a mix of relief and empowerment. I walked past Damien, who avoided my gaze, and Renee, who gave me a calm, almost approving nod. The day I thought would be my worst had turned into the day I realized something important. The game in that office was never about who yelled the loudest or smiled the widest. It was about awareness, patience, and knowing when to watch and when to act. Have you ever had a moment where everything you thought you knew flipped in an instant? That's what happened to me that day. And it made me realize. The rules aren't always what you think, and sometimes, the unexpected observer holds all the power.